Hello boys and girls, my name is Hossy and welcome to another day in Minecraft without mining for the last time. Today I will revisit all the special places that made up the history of the last 125 episodes of this world. And where better to start than at spawn. Because of the outset, I set for myself to not mine any naturally generated blocks. Materials at the beginning were hard to come by. As this created landscape bears witness, there were a lot of creeper explosions that got me wood, stone and dirt, paired with oh so many deaths. With my pockets lined with some essential blocks, I searched out a village, as village trading is an essential part for some blocks and items if there is no mining allowed, especially diamond tier gear. What I found was a pink sheep that I sheared to make myself a bed. This is not the original one, we will see that later on. With the village fenced in, the pink sheep sheared, and the place lit up, the journey could start. Killing golems for iron, trading with villagers for emeralds, gear and essential books. Soon, however, my initial materials, especially wood, ran out and I built my first tree farm, creeper powered. With more tightly packing trees, I could get more wood per creeper explosion. But the next logical step is to use TNT instead of creepers. And for that I need gunpowder and sand. TNT is a better way to blow things up as you actually have control over it. And you do not tend to die that much. Of course, TNT also requires sand, so at the beginning I had to be careful to not blast through all my TNT without using some of it to restock on sand for the next batch. I found myself a desert for my sand needs that also had a coral reef next to it, which is very convenient as a lot of the later progress required TNT duping. With enough sand, the bottleneck then becomes gunpowder, for which I built a jellycat powered creeper farm that did not scare creepers, but eventually produced enough gunpowder. As this is something that comes up every once in a while, let's see if the farm is still not working. No, at least not as intended. It seems that at some point I did remove the cat and let the creepers just randomly find their way to the trapdoors. With a better setup to collect materials, I set out to find the place for the permanent base, which I found close by on a medium-sized plain island. There I placed down the original pink bed that I crafted from the natural spawned pink sheep and got to work on a cobble generator to have a basic building block. Unfortunately, I left it running at some point while unloading the chunks, which broke it, and it is now a fountain. I built a second one next to it. With the building blocks sorted out, I started the first real project, a village breeder, so we could have a massive trading hall. All the buildings are a few blocks off the ground to afford me the future possibility to terraform around them and have something under them without the need to blast the ground open with TNT and destroying half the farm above. Villager trading generally means converting them several times, which requires quite a bit of gold. Therefore, some work in the nether was required. Collecting magma blocks, breaking onto the nether roof, where the gold farm was erected. The bartering set up underneath came later on. With the gold for the apples sorted, I could start the villager trading hall, which is stacked on 4 floors. The first one for all the librarians. Next, stonemasons for all the terracotta variants, raw and glazed. Then another floor with a special breed of stonemasons, ice masons. I introduced them through my own data pack, and they are essentially stonemasons born in a cold biome with an ice trade instead of quartz pillars. As I envisioned quite some redstone contraptions, there is also a floor with clerics. The last floor is not completely filled and contains a mix of farmers, toolsmiths, armorer and blacksmiths to supply me with armor tools and nourishment. With a villager breeder on hand, I siphoned off some for an iron farm, which is an essential part for every thriving Minecraft economy, even in a single-player world. Over time, I built up more agriculture-related farms on top of the villager breeder, while I squeezed in a smelting array between the breeder and the trading hall. As fuel, I used blaze rods, which meant another farm in the nether. With villages and iron taken care of, the next logical step was wood. But first I needed a bone meal production to supply the ever-hungry tree farm. I started with a generic tree farm for birch, oak, spruce and in theory jungle. Next was the self-sustaining nether tree farm, for which I had to hunt down quite some bastions to collect enough ancient debris from the chests to build it. Then I also wanted one for acacia, as dead bark and orange wood is really good to build with. The next tree farm was a big one for 2x2 trees, mainly focused on jungle and dark oak. The last tree farm I built was for mangrove, again mostly because the redwood is fantastic to build, but that one came quite a bit later on, as at that point this new wood was not yet in the game. I never came around to a cherry wood tree farm, and I never updated this world to get to pale oak. In between the building of all those wood farms, I also blasted out 2 holes down to bedrock for a creeper farm and a slime farm. The creeper farm comes in handy not only for producing more TNT to power our endeavors, but also rockets, which we needed after conquering the end, which has an entry portal not too far from the base. But of course, getting access to this underground structure also required some blasting. Making use of a villager trading hall requires quite some emeralds, so a stacking raid farm was part of the plan from the beginning. The changes in the game mechanic then also prevented me from updating beyond 1.20.4, as that would break the farm, and getting a hold of the emeralds would have been quite difficult. Besides the established farms, there are many smaller ones. Agriculture-related ones are above the villager breeder, like wheat, honey, sugarcane, melons and pumpkins. In between that farm tower and the smelter, I squeezed in 2 more farm stacks. One has a sheep farm with all colors and a cactus farm that takes up quite some vertical space. The other one has a wide range. Netherwort, snow that I need for the ice masons, a concrete factory, 2 tall flowers, cocoa beans, bamboo, dripstone and lava. I have divided the whole series in 3 phases. Phase 1 ended once I moved to this island and basically consisted of getting basic supplies. Phase 3 is about decorating and crazy projects. At this point we are in the middle phase that focuses on building farms for materials for the decorations. In that regard we still need a few farms. The last that I added in the base are dirt, then basalt and finally clay, as I need some undyed terracotta for building. I connected the output of all those together into a blast chamber to make it more efficient. With so many items, I needed quite a bit of a sophisticated storage system that can sort multiple items into the same chest. Thereby, the whole storage can be somewhat compact while still holding all items. There are still some materials that have missing farms that require a special environment and therefore do not fit onto the island. They were not necessarily built in the same order that I am presenting them. The closest to the base is a copper farm making use of a zombie spawner. This is essential as I could not update to the trail chambers, so getting copper still involved some effort. Close by the raid farm there is an ocean monument. Instead of draining it and exploding everything, which would be quite painful, I opted for a combination with bubbling them up in a corner and a cleverly selected AFK spot so they basically only spawned in that area. With the proper storage system and outlaying farms, I need quite a few shulker boxes for transporting and storing. Therefore, I built a shulker farm in the end to avoid the hassle of transporting the shulker to the overworld. Because this farm broke with an update and I forgot its location, I did a second one. As for the last project, I needed about 9,000 shulker boxes. In between the various farm projects, there was also some investigation into how to do mining with flying machines, which I figured out, but the setup is quite massive, so I did not use it. What I did, however, install was a request system for our storage and farms that could request some items in shulker boxes when the amount has run low. This allowed for more automation of the various farms that needed bone meal, and I also could just pull out cobblestone, stone, smooth stone, iron and some wood types out of the storage in large quantities instead of running around all of our farms. For almost all dyes I had a farm, save for black. Therefore I underwent some automated ocean draining for a squid farm. For convenience I also added another smelting array that was fed by bamboo to smelt smaller batches with better fuel efficiency. The last 2 farms I added was a mushroom farm and a frog-light farm, as I now had a better understanding what I needed for all the builds that at this point in time had already started for some buildings. For the decorative side of building around my farms, the initial idea had been ancient Asian architecture that is also a bit dilapidated and run down. Think Angkor Wat. If you have followed the series, you know that this is not how it came out. The first building was the one for the villager trading hall. That was mainly inspired by Japanese temples. From the color palette you can see that this was before we had mangrove in the game. As some of the farms had a small footprint and were quite high, this indicated some towers. In the end, I came across a nice structure for the Taipe 101 that was the right size for the agricultural farming tower. This is also where the whole idea of dilapidated building as a concept for the whole base went out of the window. But I at least stuck with the Asian theme. As there were 2 more farm towers, the next building needed to be a double tower, with the obvious choice the Petronas Towers. But to make my life harder, I decided to not align it along the axis to ensure optimal coverage of the 2 towers. If I decided to have a unique building for every farm, this would be quite a big variety, which meant I had to come up with quite some ideas. Therefore, I decided to have one unique building theme for everything from the iron, bone meal and all our tree farms. I really wanted to bring the rundown idea back. I saw some pictures of some quite modern ghost towns that were overgrown that are located in Asia, so that was what I went for. I think the best fit would be Hoshima Island in Japan, but a bit more overgrown. Then for the farms linked to the blast chamber, I decided on a build pattern by BWO that he called Brutalist, which fit quite well with the rundown industrial theme. This still left quite some structures in the middle, mainly the 2 furnace arrays and the storage building. As I follow Hermitcraft, Joel's build style of his sprawling Japanese city fits the theme well. I took heavy inspiration from his build and created a wide variety of facades based on that, which I could then put around the buildings. Covering the whole thing with a roof was then a more creative process of connecting the various pieces together to make it fit. All that was left to do was some terraforming, as many of the buildings were just floating in the air, as well as covering up the 2 holes from the creeper and slime farm. Over the last 10 or so episodes of this series, I tackled the main project. With not being allowed to mine, the only way to get blocks was having a farm for them or use TNT and then collect. This last approach does not really scale, and I wanted to see if I can build a quarry, since I saw one of the first ones on the SciCraft server. That is what I set out to do. For convenience, I also added a mob switch, because it would be disastrous if a creeper blew the contraption up at the wrong moment, which would be any moment. Quite a bit of preparation went into it. I needed a quite large starting hole to build the quarry in, and then either sides needed a side trench. The biggest mechanism that I ever built, of course, is the quarry itself. Only mining and exploding the blocks is no good, as they also need to be stored, which also implies sorting. Luckily, due to the relative small dimension, it was feasible enough to have multiple sorting and storage silos that did not involve item transportation through the nether. The multiple locations were necessary so that all the components were loaded and worked as intended. In the end, all the preparation and checking paid off, as the quarry ran perfectly over the whole length of its 1000 blocks. And this brought us here now, where I will end this series. Before we do so, let's have a look at some interesting numbers. I checked, and the introduction video for this series was recorded almost exactly 3 years ago. I played over 2000 days in this world, which included quite some AFK time at some farms, but also running the quarry end to end, which took several real days. In real time, this is a bit under 100 days. I only died 634 times, which is a surprising low number for me, with creepers making up the largest part with 179. None of them survived either. I wrecked more than 1.5 million zombified piglins, died 3 times in search for Swift Sneak, and apparently killed myself 4 times. As expected, the number of blocks mined is low in general, with higher numbers for leaves, and snow layers taking the top. There is a clear pattern for blocks that I placed down, which were also broken more frequently due to my misplacement of them. I do have plans for the next series, but that may be a bit in the future, as I want to prepare myself a bit so that I might finally end up with a consistent build theme, and maybe until that time play Minecraft in a bit of a different fashion. I hope you enjoyed this series and subscribe to be notified as soon as the next one starts. Goodbye!